Hi, I'm Cindy Abbott, Letro for Behind the Camera. And today we are with actor, director, producer, fundraiser, writer, you name it. Addison Henderson is with us. And the other thing that is really important is he's a Buffalo native. And he has really, he's really one of the people that's trying to promote film in this area, using the locations, telling the stories of the city. And Addison, we are seated in a building that's very familiar to you, the Michigan Avenue Baptist Church. Tell me a little bit about why we're here.
We are here in this church. This church is a historical landmark. My father took over this church, Bishop Henderson, in 1974. And it was scheduled to possibly go for the wrecking ball.
Wow.
But it was his ingenuity, his pride, and his go-get-it spirit that didn't allow that to happen. And next thing you know, years later, this church is on the National Registry because it is the Underground Railroads, and it's the first church built by African Americans for African Americans here in the city of Buffalo. And basically, this church was the Underground Railroad. Slaves, runaway slaves, coming on that trail, used to come here and hide before they were going over into Canada. This is one of the last stops. And so I've been a part of this church my whole life. My whole life I've been a part of this church. And, to see my father still curate basically a museum here. People come from all over the world. During the tourist season, they come from all over the world just to hear him talk, and tell stories. This is a standing landmark to history.
And this corner right here.
This whole corner, and adjacent is the Nash house. And I used to live in the Nash house. There's a story when my father, he wanted to, take over the Nash house, and because he knew of what it could be. He had an idea, he had some foresight. And Mrs. Nash was in a nursing home. And I'm a little 4-year-old kid, and I had got my first dollar that day. And we go to see her in a nursing home. And I say, Mrs. Nash, I have something for you. And I gave her my dollar.
Aww.
And she just cried. I remember that moment like it was yesterday. And she cried, and she told my father, she was like, I want you guys to take over the house and watch the house and take care of it. And that's what we did for many, many years until, the preservation, they took over and made it into the beautiful structure it is now.
And it tells the story of a very important story of the history of Black Americans in this community and how important that was.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm proud. That's why I love my city, and I'm proud of that because it also makes me a part of the history that's been here. Because we were part of the people that was just my father and our family were there, living in the history in a sense, saving it in a way.
You lived in Buffalo from the time you were born till you were about 20 years old?
Yeah, from the time I was born till I was about 20 years old. Went away, came back when I was 24. Stayed again until I was 26. Made a couple films here. The Forgotten City, a film about Buffalo, and particularly about a tragedy in 2001. My best friend, Jermaine Cross, being brutally slain for no reason at all, basically. Gold chain portable DVD player. But we made a story to show peace and hope in times of tragedy. And that's what that was about. And it really was I would say, the major launch of me as a filmmaker.
Well, what's interesting about that is, having this upbringing, being a part of the church, having your father be somebody who was very politically active, but also this religious background in a way. In some ways you'd think, gee, how do you go on and be somebody involved in film, but yet you were able to meld the two?
Yeah, absolutely. Growing up in the Nash house and having been a part of this church, it's filled with such great history. And so having that history a part of my bloodline just was something that was, it just allowed me to want to be a storyteller. Now, on the other hand, my father, he's a world traveler. And everywhere he went, he used to take a Super 16 camera. And on Saturday mornings, right here in this church, he will pull down the screen, pull out the projector and he would show me all these old film reels, and he would tell all these amazing stories about where he was, what it felt like when he was there, and really it captivated me. I was enthralled by his words. He just left me on a hook because he would come back the next week and tell me more stories. It was always like to be continued, like wait until next Saturday, son. And so that for me, living in that was just an amazing thing for a young kid, because it made me curious about storytelling. And then from then on, I used to be that kid that would stay up late nights, overnight on the weekends, and watch VHS tapes of movies that were out, you know?
And you also traveled. I mean, you were able to spend a lot of time. Your perspective was one that was, you had the local perspective of growing up in Buffalo, but because of your father, you also had this very international, world view.
Absolutely. And then, him also being a traveler, but then, I was 12 years old, and he put me on a plane by myself, and he said, here, you're gonna go to Trinidad. I have some friends down there. They're not black, but they're Indian. And you're gonna go and you're gonna be and stay with them for the summer. And so I spent my 13th birthday in Trinidad, and it was an amazing experience. I'm talking about I took showers outside, picking coconuts down off a tree, walking through sugarcane fields, slashing down sugarcane, eating it as I walk and talk, and just like enjoying the people. But also, it allowed me to have a perspective of like, how do you deal with other cultures, right? Do you judge? No, not for me. That's not what I do. What I do is I sit down with a person, I sit down with people, and I try to understand who they are. Because for me, that's the best way to really gain a perspective and to be a truthful storyteller.
Well, certainly making movies is a way to tell stories, but you've done it all. You left Buffalo and went to New York. You decided you really wanted to learn seriously how to act.
Yes.
But you go behind the camera in many of your films. You're also the star in them, so that you're wearing a lot of different hats.
Yeah, you know what? I know I am, and the thing is, I try to surround myself with a very strong team. But it's also been a maturation process for me. It's been like, I remember when I was going to acting and directing school. My instructor, Edward Morehouse, he was a tough son of a gun, I tell you that much. But he would say, okay, we're going to do this workshop now, this play, but you're also going to direct it, Addison, okay? So you're going to direct yourself in this stage play. And I was like, okay, I'll do it, And so that was kind of my first beginnings of directing myself. And so it's been over the course of years doing short films, doing web series, where I've had some failures and I've had some successes, to where now I actually feel comfortable. Now we're going to embark on this amazing project here in the city of Buffalo. Now I really know that I'm ready. You feel it now. And it's like, so now I'm like, okay, I wrote this thing, and now I'm going to act and direct in it.
One of the things I was thinking is how quickly, like all of a sudden, certain things come together. You were here recently when Marshall was filmed here,
Yes.
Chadwick Boseman, who you work with, help. You also help him train and keep
train
him. It sounds as if you do lots of things, in helping him. But for him, when he was here, he was somebody that you knew was doing well, but then all of a sudden, when Marshall and Black Panther and these things all came out, it seems as if it was overnight, but I'm sure he's been working all along. Same thing could happen with you,
Absolutely. We say it's never too many kings at our table. So we have a very tight-knit crew, and so we all strive to make each other better. And so, and for him, obviously it wasn't overnight. He's early 40s. He's been doing it since he was in high school, and being a stage director and writer and actor, you know what I'm saying? So when you see somebody explode, very rarely is it overnight, very rarely. There's a lot of hard work, a lot of toil to take to even get to this moment for me right now.
Tell me about right now. About what you're trying to do, because you have, you sort of assembled a group of people, your, group at the table, your circle. But tell me what you want to do here.
Well, I was working on a movie with Chadwick in Philadelphia called 17 Bridges. And I told him, I was like, when we're done here, I'm going to go to Buffalo, I'm going to do a movie. And I said, I'm gonna write it right now. So I wrote a script over the course of 2 months. Now, it wasn't like I just had an idea and I just wrote the script. Now, I have been digesting and thinking about this script for a couple of years. But I just never sat down and wrote it. And so when I got to Philly, I was like, I'm gonna write it now. And so I wrote it over the course of 2 months, made some edits, and then came to Buffalo. January 24th. And I was like, all right, we're gonna make a movie. And so now, we're heading down that process to begin filming on March 19th over the course of a 4-week period. The name of this film is called G.O.D. It's an acronym for Givers of Death. And then the premise behind it really is it's about a hitman trying to find peace during the apocalypse. So, it's a very, most people read it, they say this is an original idea. I had a lot of people that I talked to that really inspired this story. A lot of my own personal life, my own personal journey is embedded within this story. So it really comes from my heart and my blood and my soul.
So where did the ideas come from? I mean, you said that you've been thinking about this, so it doesn't just hit you one day. And how does it develop? I mean, what is that process?
A lot of times for me, I have dreams, and then I'll wake up and I'll write my dreams down, and then I'll start putting them together, and next thing you know, I'm stringing out a story. And so that's really what happened here with this process. And then as I started stringing out a story, I started meeting certain people. And I would be like, oh, that's inspiring. And then I would take some of that story, some of that, and I would just like put it inside my story and just kind of meld it together. And it ended up turning out all right, but it has a very strong spiritual sense to it because my father, I know, is a religious man, but for me, I'm not so much religious more than I am spiritual. And so the questions that I like to raise with my characters is, who am I? Where do I belong? Why am I here? And so a lot of times in the things that I create, those questions are always being asked because for me as a human being and my spiritual self, and trying to find peace at times, I'm always asking, where am I at now? I'm checking my sequences of my life. Okay, why am I here? And so a lot of that drives my own personal feelings and thoughts, drives my stories.
What did your dad think about this sort of, as you said, your father had more of a religious, you're more spiritual,
yeah.
But I mean, the fact that there is a message there, that's a big message.
Yeah. Well, he said, what does the G.O.D. mean? And I said, it means givers of death, Dad. And he was like, oh, okay. And then he kind of let me explain it to him a little bit, and he was like, oh, that's pretty cool. My dad's 83 now, so, he's not as fast. Well, his mind is still fast, but he's not as fast as he used to be. But, he still can hold his own, you know what I mean? And so he was like, that's pretty interesting. And I was like, well, I don't know if he knew until I've been on this new tour here in Buffalo promoting this movie and what we're about to do, that he was such an inspiration to me in terms of with the storytelling. Because I had to actually sit down and think about it. I was like, where did all this come from? Where did it come from? And I started checking my life. I started saying, okay, I remember this, I remember that, I remember this. Okay, this is why I'm here.
He must be really proud, though.
I believe he is. I think so. He always says, my son is in town, the filmmaker. That's what yeah, so I think he's proud of me. I think he's proud.
What would make you feel like you finally
arrived? What would make me feel like I've arrived? Okay, I'll tell you, getting this movie done and it being phenomenal. And people walking out of the theater shaking, and wanting to talk about it. And just like sitting around having a cup of coffee after the movie's over, and I'm saying, what was that? Like, what did that mean? What did you think that meant? What was that like for you? Now that, more than anything, will make me feel like I've arrived, because now I got people thinking, I got people talking,
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. It has been a pleasure to talk to you, Addison Henderson. I hope all good things happen for you.
Yes, they will.
They will.
I like to say, fate is on my side this go around.
Great. Until next time, this is Behind the Camera.